Oh, he's already recording.
Don't worry about it. I'm going to edit it.
Oh, we got Corona on the recording now. Don't worry, you can't get it. You can't get it through the screen.
What's going on, Adam? I appreciate you coming back. This is my new program, The Exchange. So this is your first time in this one, but we did talk last year on my other program, American Liberty. Thank you very much. It's Corona time.
Time.
I tell you what, you see how creative people can be during this time that when they have to be quarantined and staying inside. Everybody's coming up with these real funny, hilarious videos I've seen all over social media. People are creative, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
But I just saw a post here on Twitter saying that you're 90% certain that you might have it. How are you feeling, man?
Yeah, no, it's you know, a weird, funky kind of flu that I'm experiencing. Relatively mild, you know, and the fact that I've gotten it, if that's true, I don't know. I don't, you know, never probably never know for certain. But you know, the fact that I've gotten, I think, is a testament to its virality, because I wasn't around anybody who was sick. I probably got it from someone who was a non-symptomatic carrier. And my wife was in the hospital for a few days about a month and a half ago and tested positive for flu B. And flu B was a really bad one this season. The flu vaccine that was going on, I don't get the annual flu vaccines. No, bad idea.
I know a lot of people that don't, because it's only like 10% a chance that it's actually going to help you.
Right, and that was the case with flu B this year. That the main vaccine formula was 10% or less effective. So it really was, if for one, an unnecessary chore, but also an unnecessary or I should say a not quite worthwhile chore, you know, to reduce your risk of getting the flu maybe by 10% this season, and that there's a risk that goes along with any time you inject something into your body. And, you know, I'm not, you know, anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine. I'm pro the market and people with good information without the corruption of government interfering, making smart choices about vaccinations. And when I step back and look at it as a libertarian, I'm really disappointed that we don't have a better way of just dealing with the seasonal flu, that it does kill tens of thousands of people every single year. And we don't have like a vaccine system that just lives up to what we're capable of. And it's because of government. This is why we can't have nice things. So in my case right now, before the coronavirus statistics started blowing up in the United States, we were traveling to libertarian state conventions, you know, significant gatherings, getting out on the road, shaking hands, meeting people, sharing joints, things like that. You know, just the way we normally are, casually interacting with people. And then based on the symptoms that we're experiencing, like I said, it's just a funky little flu. Like I have a very slight cough, but you know, I have allergies. I have seasonal allergies. I have hay fever. You know, and there's nothing I'm experiencing in any kind of respiratory distress that is at all out of the norm for that. And we finally read, again the disappointment in you know, how bad the information flow is around something like this is now directly relevant for me. We only found out in reading the news 2 days ago that diarrhea symptoms are part of, and intestinal distress in general are present in 50% of serious COVID-19 cases. And you know, I had been experiencing a little bit of that, but you know, when you're traveling and eating food in different places, you know, like I've had worse, you know, upset stomachs from you know, from just having a bad meal in a weird place before. I do have a little bit of a body ache that's unusual for me, and both my wife and I are experiencing you know, a sort of flu-like, you know, body stiffness, but it's very, you know, an ache, but it's very, very mild, except in the lower back. And I wonder if that's going to emerge as a trend, or if that's just us, or if that's just conjecture. But one of the problems, you know, and this just goes to underscore the challenge that we're facing dealing with the hysteria around this is that when you say, oh my God, there's a deadly disease out there, and it might present as just little common cold symptoms. Well, everybody with a common cold might be going, oh shoot, I might have the corona. I'm going to go in and get tested. And then you see, the overwhelming of the healthcare system. And that's really going to be what causes more harm than good, of course. And the economic repercussions of what the government is doing right now are incredibly disastrous, making things worse. And the best analogy that I've heard to describe this now, and this was from a medical analysis, is that it's like an elephant being attacked by a house cat and freaking out trying to deal with the house cat and accidentally jumping off a cliff and dying. And I know that's a bit extreme and morbid, but maybe a more precise analogy would be an elephant getting attacked by a house cat and stumbling down an embankment and getting all scuffed up and maybe a few broken bones and bruises. But that's a really good way of understanding the bigger picture and the overreaction by society as a whole, but especially government, media, and in some ways, sadly, the medical industry taking advantage of this.
Well, think about this. If you wanted to get tested, you ain't got enough test kits for you. The big,
I don't want to.
Right, but you know that.
I don't want to be on their list.
But then you got like, for example, I
don't want to put any even slight extra unnecessary burden on the healthcare system at this time. I'm going to be doing a sort of soft self-quarantine, and that's about it.
Small businesses are getting crushed right now. Like I tweeted yesterday, I went and got a haircut. Thankfully, my barber's still open as of tonight, thanks to the governor. He no longer has a business for the next couple of weeks. But I gave him a big tip because there was nobody in there. I gave him a good tip. I recommend everybody, listen, go out to your small business, order food in from the takeout. You got the delivery services, get food from the local businesses because they are going to be hurt by this. And the media, I stopped watching the media about a week ago because it's ABC, NBC. It's just like the world's ending. I'm like, this is, crazy. Like they're panicking people. My wife is, everybody's up in arms and worried. And listen, it's something new. It's something that people could be scared of, but the way that it's being portrayed, the way it's being handled is just making it worse. And the reason why I wanted to bring you on today is because we've talked before on our discussion last year about localization of government and how it works better than the big Fed. All right, so now let's look at this. What's happened here? We have the big federal government that's trying to handle a national pandemic. They don't have the resources. They don't have the ability because it's too big. Your quality control gets thrown out. When you have a big overburdened government to try to fix something, look what happens. It's mass hysteria. I can't even get toilet paper at the store. I don't know how you're doing on toilet paper, but I got like one roll left because there is none. People are buying toilet paper. Like, who thought that would, you're a Marine, you've had training. Was that the first thing that you would be taught to survive? God forbid we have an apocalypse, is have toilet paper? Take a shower.
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that's nice about this is no one is freaking out to the point where infrastructure is going to go down. Water is secure, electricity is secure, the internet is going to be just fine. I know they reduced the resolution for Netflix and Amazon, which is why I download stuff in advance anyway. But people are, who are worried about toilet paper. I wonder if there was a collective conscious thing that, before, like, so one of the, the big question mark here is how much less worse than they say it is it actually, right? Based on, how many cases, because they're saying it's super viral, and I tend to believe the reporting on that, right? That it is communicable by coughing, that it's that it's more or less airborne. I don't think they're really lying about or distorting much when they say, it's general contagion factor and how long it's contagious on surfaces and things like that. But excuse me. Oh, they're also saying that an individual may be contagious for 37 days after showing symptoms. That might be like the extreme outlier. I think, maybe the 2-week self-quarantine is a lot more reasonable. But that does have some scary effects if people are contagious that long, if it's going to keep going that long. and continue having that effect. But I really appreciate what you're saying. You know, go out and patronize small local businesses. You know, especially watch out for people who are going to be hurt by this. So if it's as contagious as that, you know, it's the I forget her title. I was just reading the story about the woman who is in charge of the New Jersey state government's healthcare team response to this, and saying like, yeah, I'm gonna get it. And she's 71, and it's just like, yeah, we're all gonna get exposed. It's not a big deal, and you know, let's deal with this rationally. Right. And you know, I'm torn in a way between you know, definitely we want to calm people down about the virus itself and say, look, we can handle this. This is not a big deal. Like, yes, it's a legitimate healthcare crisis, a relatively small one. They're you know, very widespread and you know, being global in its nature, that's a bit unique. But in terms of like compared to the Spanish flu, compared to, you know, so many localized health incidents, you know, dengue fever coming back in Florida right now, even killing more people than corona there. The plague of locusts that they're experiencing in the Middle East and Africa right now, like that's gonna kill. More people are gonna die of starvation, you know, and we can't respond to things like that in a rational, humane way because we're being overwhelmed with the fear. But then on the flip side of that, part of me does want to get people riled up in the sense of like, no, we are facing a surge in tyranny. You know, and I, you know what, I'll share with you my graphic that I made for my my press conference yesterday. I hope this doesn't require too much explanation, but we have the traditional, like, you know, flatten the, oh, sorry, so this is the flatten the curve, right? If we flatten it to here, you know, then we don't overwhelm the healthcare system. If we don't flatten the curve, if we have a spike in cases and it crosses some imaginary line where we have more people than, you know, who need hospital beds than need it, and it comes back down because it's just kind of going to get out everywhere. I think that's a legitimate, you know, general attitude towards this. Hey, let's be a little extra vigilant about, you know, sanitation and self-care and things like that. And that's the people who are saying like, look, this is it, stay calm, that's really important, and I think that's very legitimate. And there are some people saying we shouldn't flatten the curve, that's going to have a worse effect because of how it keeps people you know, frightened and overwhelming the healthcare system longer. We don't exactly know how this is going to play out. We do know, however, that the government interventions make all of it worse because they prevent people from making rational decisions based on their own interests. So yeah, I'll just one more thing about this graphic. This is the important thing about this graphic. The thing I'm more concerned about is the curve of tyranny. We have to flatten the curve of tyranny. And if you see this going up, the difference with the tyranny curve is that there's even if we were to stop it tomorrow, even if this really optimistic curve on the virus happens, the negative impacts are going to last forever. If the curve of tyranny keeps going up, it might level off. It might stop getting worse at some point, but it's not like it's just going to naturally come back down. Governments don't take on powers with the intent of relinquishing them. If we get up to here, if things get much worse on the tyranny curve and we're stuck in this state for a long time, it means things are going to suck for a long time. We have Trump nationalizing industry. We have you know, all these health decisions being done in secret. We have the inability to just go out and conduct our normal lives. What we're going to have is a step down from here, and it's going to take a long time. I should probably add that to the graphic here. There might be a stepping down over time there, but that's what I'm really afraid of, and that's going to hurt more people than the virus ever could if we let it get to that point and we're feeling those economic repercussions for years.
And that's what I want to get to. The government doesn't make medical equipment. The government doesn't make masks. The private companies do. Most companies were chased overseas to produce these because of high taxation, because of an unfriendly business environment for years. I mean, this is going back whether Democrat, Republican, for the last 20, 30, 40 years. 80% of our pharmaceuticals are made in China. Most of these masks are made in China. We have a problem now where the supply chain has been disrupted. We can't get the necessary material because the government was ill prepared for an event like this. So to rely on the government, which constantly wants to take more control of your healthcare, take more control of your day-to-day life. This is an example of why.
Kevin, I don't mean to be like, you know, a grammar Nazi here, kind of, but the language I got to take issue with a little bit of the language that you use there. We say the government was ill prepared for something like this. No, they were very well prepared to take advantage of a crisis, to blow it up, and to take advantage of us. That's what government is for. When you say they're ill prepared, I think you're, and again, this is something that it's a, you know, I would correct myself if I caught myself, you know, like saying something like this, because I think it's much more accurate to say that you know, the government was ready to take advantage of a crisis. And if you say that the government was ill prepared, or that they could have been prepared, you're giving into this framework that the government exists to protect us. You know, that oh, if the government did a better job, no, the government is doing exactly what it is set up to do.
Well, the reliability, people rely heavily on the government today, as it stands now.
Sure, right.
So as it stands, most people are being reliant on them. This is now like, okay, well, now we need masks, we need medical equipment, we need the healthcare to be able to take on this crisis, and it can't because of all the red tape that was put in place by government, how the industry, you know, think about regulations that within the
healthcare. No, I get it. It's just a semantic framing thing, and I prefer to look at it that way. So to grant your point here, I would just introduce another analogy, right? The government breaks your leg, gives you a crutch, and says, hey, if it wasn't for the government, you wouldn't be able to walk. And if you're stuck in that situation, you better have a good crutch, you know? And if the crutch starts failing, you're not even going to be able to walk with the government taking care of you at that point. So fair enough.
So, and I know that you are a big, you run on a localization of government, you know, taking care of community. So in the Adam Kokesh vision, where the federal government would not be, you know, involved in a situation like this,
at all.
How would we handle this type of crisis in a localized government fashion?
Well, first of all, we see that the centralization of government leads to corruption, interference in the redistribution of resources to meet people's needs in a crisis like this, and the lack of transparency leads to a lot of fear and uncertainty. Just by the nature of government, the more localized it is, the more transparent and accountable it is. And so to have the resources that society allocates towards dealing with health crises handled by people who are actually accountable to the people they're supposed to be serving, whether it's through voluntary localized systems of government or through the market, is going to empower us to take care of a situation like this much, much more effectively. In the socialization that we see, Donald Trump nationalizing industry, like I said before, it's only going to make things worse. The other thing that we see in terms of the immigration issue, and it is falsely framed as open borders or closed borders, and the libertarian answer to this is, wait, what's a legitimate border in the first place? If the government puts up a line around this territory and says, you know, we own everything within that, is that a legitimate border? I don't think so. The only legitimate borders are private property borders, or borders created by communities, could be local governments, you claiming territory and actually putting it to use and saying, we own this because we're here, we're occupying it, not just we put up a giant fence around it. And one of the consequences of this concept of government borders is that they're not effective. If you want a border to effectively control freedom of movement, which you should in a situation like this, if you have an elderly community and you want to quarantine, you need to be able to do that effectively. When you draw this giant line on the map around everything, you can't get that. So, you know, in the sense of immigration, if you say, hey, I don't want to live around any Muslims or Mexicans, well, you can't do that. First of all, you can't do that with other people's property. You can't say, well, I don't want to live near you, therefore you can't live over there because that's too close. No, you only get to control what's yours. You don't get to force your will on other people. And if you want that effectively, it has to be local. And I want people who have that closed borders mentality to be able to build communities based on that, if they want to effectively, voluntarily, and not be subject to Donald Trump's ineffective immigration control type policies that we see at the federal level. So if you wanted to quarantine effectively, if you wanted to have resources go to taking care of people in the community, if you wanted to strike an appropriate balance between impositions of quarantine, self-quarantine, mandatory quarantine, and of course I would say never mandatory. You only have a right to disassociate. You don't have the right to force other people to disassociate. But all of these things balanced against the economic impacts of those decisions would be made much better in line with the needs of a community at a local level than we have at the federal level today, which is a grossly over-centralized system.
So the state, now, would you be talking about state or like as local as county level?
So we should back up for a second, right? And every time I have to introduce myself as a presidential candidate, I throw up in my mouth a little bit. But it's important to understand that this platform is not putting on the ring of power, but throwing it directly in the fire. It is the localization of the federal government through a peaceful, orderly, responsible bankruptcy process. So I resign on day one, and we end up with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations as the first step in localization. This is a radical policy in terms of striking at the root. Henry David Thoreau, for every 1,000 striking at the branches of evil, there is one striking at the root. But in terms of policy, it's extremely moderate. Only 3 million out of 22 million who work for government at all levels in the United States work for the federal government, and a lot of those will be absorbed by states in this process. So I'm proposing that we cut less than 1 in 7 government employees. It's embarrassingly moderate, actually, and that states will be allowed to do whatever they want after that. You live in a liberal state, you live in a conservative state, you don't have to see each other as enemies anymore, because right away, you're not fighting over a centralized system. You both get more of what you want. This is, like I said, the first step in localization. The ultimate goal is to get government localized down to the community level. And as libertarians, we've been kind of selling this wrong, saying government should this and shouldn't that, and can this and can't that. It should be, look, you can have as much or as little government as you want. You can be as liberal as you want. You can be as conservative as you want, as long as you don't force it on anybody else. As long as it's voluntary, everybody can get what they want. So to answer your question, the goal is to get it down to the community level. What scale that is, that's up to you. That's up to the community. Community could be a community of one. If you want to be sovereign on your own land and you have the right to declare your independence and opt out, only at that point are you truly free. And you also have to be free in that state to form new communities, to group together with other people. And those communities could be whatever size is appropriate for the people who want to be a part of them.
I want to get to, because I want to make sure we get everything in time, the bailout that was just proposed and signed by the Senate. $1 trillion, over 1.2 trillion, I think was the final number.
Was that today? I didn't see that one.
Mitch McConnell is on he signed it. It's just waiting to get signed off by the president.
Yeah, I saw. I mean, I've been tracking the rumblings. I didn't see it get to that official point, but it's not surprising. This is where government, like I said, is very well prepared to take advantage. Never let a good crisis go to waste.
We're already at 24 trillion debt on a national level. This bailout, for people who don't have, that are losing their businesses now with this quarantine and mandatory, New York State is at 100% closure other than essential personnel, which is hospitals, fire departments, so on and so forth. 100% closure. So people are going to lose businesses, lose paychecks, waitresses, no money, waiters, no money. So where do they get that money if it wasn't, because now the government's saying, okay, we're going to take care of you. Here you go. Here's money. Trust the government. We're here to help you. What other avenues would people have to be, they've just lost everything because government shut them down. Now they're getting handed money. Where do these people go from there?
What do you mean at this point? Once they get the $1,000 check and they're still out of their jobs?
Well, the government forced them into closing their business. Then they're going to hand them a bailout. So
right, not even a bailout. No. Most small businesses are just going to be screwed. This is one of those things where they create a huge mess and then they get to bail out their friends and everybody else gets screwed over. And the thing about creating this this bailout at the federal level and the Federal Reserve System now adding $1.5 trillion in liquidity is that everybody using the dollar is going to lose out. This is how inflation works. It's really simple. the advantage goes to the people who are getting that money, and their purchasing power is, taken from you, because the purchasing power of your dollar goes down. So I like, where are people going to go after this once government has made such a mess? I'm just hoping people stay cool, calm, and collected in dealing with all this, so that we don't see riots, we don't see major breakdowns. I hope that, in the age of the internet, people can come together and take care of each other. We've already seen a lot of beautiful examples of that. And my message is resist, and let's be ready to resist when things get really bad, because if we continue to bow down and just say, well, if the government says we should do this, well, we're going to do this, then it's going to keep getting worse. And we are going to have, riots and really serious, shortages that are going to, hurt people. And you're going to see people starving, not being able to get access to basic medical care for, things that we would normally expect. So I say,
do you have any predictions of whether or not you're going to see boots on the ground in America, National Guard called up?
Well, before we get to that, I just want to share one beautiful positive example. There's a strip club in Oregon. What's the actual name of it? So we covered this yesterday. And it was like I wanted to know the name of the business so that we could promote them. But it was a strip club that was shut down in Oregon under the governor's orders. And the governor's orders said, well, if you're doing food delivery, you can stay in business. So you know what they did? Uber Eats. Lucky Devil Lounge. Is this Portland? Yeah, Lucky Devil Lounge in Portland, Oregon. Great little workaround. And I think the more people, just say, hey, government's obsolete. We don't need it. We don't have to follow these rules. The better off we'll be. This is a great example of that, where the government has frightened us into submission for the most part. And we're going to come out of this. I think in about a week's time, we're either going to see the curve itself leveling or the curve of hysteria leveling, and people are going to start. They're going to be more angry than they are afraid. That's going to be, a critical juncture as those lines cross. And right now, to your question, I have seen some of the activations of National Guard troops. I've seen the photos in San Diego where they're actually sending convoys of Humvees through civilian areas. And it is really disturbing, but I don't think, and what, again, the economic repercussions, the response to this, the fear is worse than, than the disease. I'm really optimistic in that I think people are going to wake up as a result of this. A lot of people are going to wake up and be like, whoa, 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 we did all that for what? Because, to the elephant fighting a house cat, right? To that analogy, the elephant isn't really society as a whole. The elephant is everybody in society except the people who are set up to profit from this. And they're the ones going, oh shit, it's a house cat. Oh shit, it's a house cat. And let me push you off a cliff.
Yeah.
And when we get up at the bottom of the cliff and go, what the heck was that? We're going to be really pissed at the people who pushed us off or got us to convinced us to jump off because of the house cat. So I don't think if troops come, I don't think it's going to turn into a major lockdown. I don't think this is a bad enough crisis. It's just going to be more government spending that's going to have more long-term disastrous effects.
And I think you may agree with me that, we're supposed to be a free and open market, okay? But I think you could agree in the fact that we have turned into a crony capitalist market. And this is an example with the bailout, because now there's a huge portion of this money going to companies, not people. So think about the people that got laid off by these companies or the people that are working for these companies. They're the ones that need the money. The billionaires that run these corporations, if they have to not make $300 million for the year, they still got their $1 billion. Do they really need that money? They'll be okay. But for the rest of society, so this bailout, I just want to end with, the fact that, listen, if it was really a bailout for the people to help the people, all the money would go to the people, not to these corporations, because we have become a crony capitalist society, and it's not a true and free open market. So tying into that, I want to ask you about, as a libertarian, free trade is always a big deal. We always promote free trade, no taxation on goods coming in. Why should the government tax goods going out or in?
Right.
I should be able to conduct business with whoever.
Absolutely.
Given everything that's happened in this past month with China, okay, China is a big, a lot of money comes from China. A lot of goods come from China. We do a lot of business with China.
I think we have a new way of pronouncing it now. It's China. I think the president, I heard him using the new pronunciation most recently.
The China. But given everything that's happened, and is it okay to be a little skeptical now when it comes to how much dealings we do with with other countries? Because now a lot of our resources come from overseas. When the supply chain gets interrupted like this, how do we see this as a libertarian?
Well, we have a lot of distortions in the global economy that lead to these unfortunate trade situations and trade balances and massive inefficiencies. For example, when I get my books printed, I get them printed in China and shipped to the United States because that's the best deal. But it really doesn't make sense if you look at like the ideal efficient situation for the economy globally. If I'm going to get books printed, I should get them printed as close to where I'm getting them printed, or where I'm taking them and distributing them. But because the American government has made it so expensive to make books in the United States, just printing costs, top to bottom, mainly taxation, regulation, so many other things. And because of that, it is so much cheaper to have them made in China and shipped to the United States that the government creates this huge relative inefficiency that makes it more efficient for me as an individual to get my books printed in China and shipped to the United States. But it's extra work for for humanity as a whole. Now, Adam wants books. You don't just have to print them and hand them to him. You have to print them and ship them across an ocean. Mm-hmm. All of those efficiencies, I hope that makes sense, because now you see
why should that be cheaper? Why should it be cheaper for me to get something made thousands of miles away? Makes no sense.
And it's only because we live in different government territories with different government regulations. And there are some things, for example, like let's say America ran out of paper wood and we couldn't grow hemp. There was some, national emergency or whatever. That was just the state of things. All printed books in America now come from China. Well, then it makes sense. It's happening in response to real scarcity and creating an efficiency by doing that. But now it's creating an inefficiency because there is no real scarcity. It's an artificially created relative scarcity by government policy that creates these distortions. So I think what we're tuning into here is those negative effects. And actually, it's very important as libertarians that we have some role in the national conversation to keep people from being easily fooled, as we generally are, by government manipulations through economic propaganda, to say, well, we have to, like the way that you posed the question, right? The way you posed the question was, should we be afraid of all this Well, in some cases, yes. In some cases, no. We have to be really careful to separate what are the disastrous effects created by government, what are the natural things in the market, and get back to that free trade ideal. Minimize government interference. You minimize the inefficiencies, and then what balance of international trades comes out of that will be a product of the market, of people interacting peacefully in their own best interest to make things happen, to provide goods and services for quality of life as efficiently as possible. That's how we make things better for everybody. That's how the market works.
So a free and open market, you would agree, would correct itself from this deficiency 100%. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Not just that, but to have the correction itself has to be done peacefully. It has to be done cooperatively. It has to be done by market forces. You can't have a government come in and fix a problem created by government without at least in some ways making it worse. So to have an accurate correction, we have to allow those market forces to correct the inefficiencies naturally.
I want to comment on, I'll talk about two more things. One being, I noticed a comment about Tulsi Gabbard. Your hashtag stand with Tulsi. How about roll over with Tulsi? Submit to the establishment. You really went off because, listen, I happen to believe.
Was that unnecessarily harsh? I mean, I kind of like Tulsi.
I get it.
But listen, on that point, no.
Well, because I'm going to say,
hard.
right? Because I want to say, I believe in you could fit in with the Libertarian Party if you're 80%. Like, you don't have to be 100%. I understand how vested you are into it and how much, you are like a philosopher when it comes to libertarian ideas. But we should be trying to grow the party. And her run against the establishment, against the Democratic establishment when she was campaigning, and her military intervention policy, I was very attracted to. I was 100% on board with that. A lot of libertarians are. You see a lot of
punking Harris.
Huh? Yeah.
And punking Kamala on stage.
Yes.
That was for really bad statism. That was beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Too.
So I was kind of like, okay, I want to see more. Now she suspends her campaign and joins the Biden team, which is complete opposite because he is the establishment.
Yeah.
So I get, but I believe that there's an underlining thing there that she's hoping to get the female VP pick. I don't know, but with the attracting more people to the Libertarian Party, and it almost seemed like she was kind of maybe there almost.
No. She had almost there.
Well,
I mean,
I wouldn't say almost.
More of a socialist.
Right. She had a lot of socialist ideas, but I mean, in the fact that she was drawn to the party a little bit, kind of like wanted to learn more about it. I know Jessica Mears met with her and gave her like the libertarian pamphlet, like this is what the Libertarian Party's about. It seemed like she was maybe interested, but then disappeared. How do we attract more people to the party?
I think localization is the answer, and this is really getting to a key evolution in libertarian messaging. And I touched on this before, saying, we've been doing it wrong in the past, saying it's about these issues and playing their game of politics, presenting libertarianism as a political philosophy. It's not. It's an ethical philosophy. And to say it's about this issue and that issue, well, we end up arguing issues instead of uniting people around taking issue with the fact that there are people trying to force their will on us from thousands of miles away. That needs to end. And that's how we bring people together, is localization. And I love this. Just found the quote from Larry Sharp that a libertarian is someone who says you can be as liberal or conservative as you want as long as you don't force it on other people. So we have to, adapt our ideological presentation to really be inclusive that way. And I think it's a great evolution. This is why I hope to be the nominee of the Libertarian Party this year. Although, man, we could go for another hour about the race and, what this looks like going into the national convention under a potential lockdown in Austin.
That's what I want to wrap up with is the convention. If the convention is canceled, how does nomination take place? I mean, we're looking to, obviously, if the rules are in place where we can't congregate at the convention, I plan on going to the convention like a lot of people from New York are lining up to do and be delegates. And
as I understand it, we don't have provisions in our bylaws for anything other than meeting in person or in an emergency where that's not possible. The Libertarian National Committee gets to choose who the nominee is. And that would be bad for a lot of reasons. No matter, I wouldn't want to win it that way. I would take it, I'll take it. But, I wouldn't want to win the nomination because the, party leadership as opposed to the party base decided that, that they wanted me to be the nominee. So I'm hoping that, the other thing is in this circumstance, we don't know what things are going to look like in 2 months. We've got 2 months from now to the national convention. And it could be that, maybe we've flattened all of these curves in the next 2 months, and we've called out the people who use this to rip us off, and we're more or less back to normal, and at least, in all the medical situations back to normal, or back to, cooler heads prevailing, and we're on our road to recovery economically. Okay, that's a distinct possibility. It could be that we're still, so if that's the case, maybe we get to proceed exactly as planned, but there are going to be a bunch of people wearing masks and gloves and, being, a little extra careful with their sanitation and hygiene. Okay. It could be that we're on full lockdown and we have to conduct the national convention in some form of civil disobedience. And maybe it's sort of soft civil disobedience. It's like a workaround, like Uber Eats and say, oh, well, we're not a strip club, we're a food delivery service now. Well, we're not convening in a hotel. We're not having groups over 50. We're having regional conventions in different corner of the park at the same time. So people, or maybe just then it's it's a 6 foot distancing thing. Who knows? I am really encouraging everybody in the Libertarian Party, and especially the LNC, to just go ahead as planned as much as possible and be ready to conduct the convention in some form of, I hate to use the term, but yeah, soft civil disobedience in a soft lockdown kind of situation.
Well, I hope that it doesn't come to what you said, where they get to pick the candidate, because then I feel like then the establishment candidate, a certain individual who has some prior experience in government who is running, won't mention his name, but for him to get picked by the party would upset me. The Ohio, let's finish with this. Ohio actually moved their primary. I was just reading an article today talking about Trump possibly could he cancel the November election? And I mean, we're getting into some tyranny issues here when we're discussing.
No, I don't. So I would be concerned if they timed this better. If they had delayed. We're going to be over this by November, one way or another. And I don't want to be overly optimistic. Of course, the virus could mutate and it could get a lot worse. And who knows? We could still be on lockdown. It could be that the curve is flattened, but it's going to keep going but that we will have gotten to at least a point of relative stasis. Right now, we're still in a very chaotic reactionary phase where people are afraid, and government is certainly stepping in to take advantage of that. But yeah, it's an exciting, it's a very fluid situation, and all the more important that we stick to our principles in times like this.
Well, I hope you feel better. I want to remind everybody who is listening to subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Go to YouTube channel, check out the YouTube channel, give a comment, give a thumbs up so this video gets shared more. And Adam, tell everybody where they can follow what you're doing. I know you have your Freedom Network, you got your show, you got your book. Please tell everybody how they can catch up on what you're up to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate that. And let me first say, as I always try to with other independent media outlets who I support this show. I'm a big tech optimist. The internet is bringing us together and making things possible we never dreamed of before, but the technology means nothing without deliberate, conscientious use. And for independent media outlets like us, that means having an active, engaged audience. So if you've enjoyed this interview, please share it, support Kevin with what he's doing, put your money where your eyes and your ears are, and support independent media. And in my case, you can find everything that I'm doing through thefreedomline.com. That's all 3 words, thefreedomline.com. You can find Kokesh for president without having to remember how to spell my funny last name. You can find my YouTube channel with about 80 million views. And right now we're doing Facebook Live press conferences. I know they're transitioning into just, Adam's Daily Update, an hour live on Facebook at 3 p.m. Eastern. So right when we get off from this, we're going to be doing our prep for that. And I really encourage everybody to join us, especially right now, to have someone, and I put myself out there as someone who can see through the headlines, who can read through the lies and tell you what's really going on, and put it in perspective that is empowering for you in, like I said, times of fluidity. Man, I feel like I've said has become my new verbal tick. I've said I've said 10 times in the last 40 minutes. Yeah, like I said, this is a time where it's important to be paying attention and staying connected with people around you and staying in touch with your principles. So Kevin, thank you so much for this opportunity to share my message with your audience.
I appreciate it, Adam, and we will get together for that military-industrial discussion when we have some more time, man.
Let's schedule another interview for, say, mid-May, as we're getting close to the convention. That could be a fun time.
Awesome, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Subscribe to the show, like it, and comment. Also, if you want the audio version because you're traveling, you're in a car, and you can't watch it, you don't have time to watch the episodes, you could go in the show notes. There is a link provided, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, whatever your pleasure may be. join me and listen via the audio versions on those other platforms, okay? But I really like YouTube. I like the way it's working out. And if you can, subscribe. The more subscribers, the better the content I can provide you, and it costs you nothing. So I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time.